By now, all of you already finished for sure learning Shinun-Ches. Most of you are already in Shin-Samach-Beis. So we will be talking about Siman Shinun-Ches and a little bit of Shinun-Ches. Shinun-Ches, specifically about the karfifos which are behind houses, in front of houses, the difference between them and regular karfifos. In Siman Shin-Nun-Ches, in Seif Yud, Alter Rebbe writes, Yeshayimrim, Shestam karfifos shalonu mukafin ladira, the stam karfif is mukaf ladira. Every karfif is a mukaf ladira. Why? Because you usually open up a door from the house to the karfif, and afterwards they make the gate around the karfif. So therefore the stam karfifos is mukafin ladira. And there's even another shitta. Shekol karfif shebetoich tchum nikra mukaf ladira. Any karfif that's within the tchum of the city is considered mukaf ladira, regardless of its size. Why? Because you have in mind daitayel of Shabbos. You have in mind to use it on Shabbos. And the Alter Rebbe writes on these, both of these, ve'ein ze ikar, and that's not how you should paskin. K'moshen isbar l'mayla berachava she'achorei abatim. Like was explained earlier regarding rachava she'achorei abatim, is right in the beginning of the Siman, and if Aleph, the Alter Rebbe mentions it, she'kshe'yasein beis hasayim karmel isi. It's more than two beis hasayim, it's considered karmel, k'moshen isbar v'siman Shinun-Ches. I did mention in the past that it's clear from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe does not hold that the karfif is only outside the city. That's why the Alter Rebbe took out the words b'seicha'ir, mechutz la'ir in the beginning. Over here he writes clearly that the shit is ein ze'ikar. You can't say that every karfif inside the city is considered a mukaf ladira. And he says that where do we know that this is? This comes from the concept of rachava she'achorei abatim, means the big empty spaces behind houses. Those are the ones that are karfifos, and that Alter Rebbe uses as a raya, that just like that is a karfif, that's a raya that you have karfifos inside the city, and you can't say stam karfif is mukaf ladira, even if it's more than beis hasayim, and even if it's in the city. So what's Siman Shinun-Ches? That's so the tour opens up, the tour in the Shulchan Aruch, they discuss it. It's interesting to see, we're going to see soon that the Lashon of Alter Rebbe adds words in different places which clarify, first of all, solve some of the problems in understanding this halacha, and more importantly fits into the whole mahalach of the Alter Rebbe in this sugya. The Torah writes that if you have a rachava in Siman Shinun-Ches, rachava she'achorei abayis, you have this big empty space behind your house. If it's lo hukaf ladira, you can only be metaltel daled amos. And if you pasach lepesach mebezah, you open up a door from your house and then you surrounded it, then it's considered hekaf ladira, and you could carry in it. The Beis Yosef right away points out to you, where is this coming from? This din of rachava she'achorei abatim he already discussed it in Siman Shinun-Ches, in Seif Yud, the second Seif Yud of the Beis Yosef, Yud in parenthesis Beis, in these new prints. Over there he brings the shit of the Ritva. Over here in Shinun-Ches just references to what it says over there. What does it say over there? Over there the Beis Yosef explains that the reason why we're makel in the rachava she'achorei abatim, because it's usually not bigger than beis hasayim, and therefore, since it's usually not bigger than beis hasayim, stam rachava she'achorei abatim is not considered a karfif. The Darkei Moshe brings it and right away says that is not the reason. The reason why we're makel in rachava she'achorei abatim, stam karfifos, is not because it's usually less than beisin, but rather because we rely on the Mordechai that in Zman Hazeh stam karfif is hukaf ladira. Stam karfif is usually hukaf ladira. We don't have to ask too many questions about it, and therefore, even if it's more than beis hasayim, it's also mutter. The same thing that Amar writes in Shulchan Aruch and Shinun-Ches at the end of the Seif. We're not worried about being tilted behind the houses. Is mishun b'zman hazeh stomon mukafin l'dira. The mistamon mukaf l'dira. K'moshen isbar le'el. K'moshen isbar le'el gabe kafaf, like the Rama himself brings in the beginning of סימן Ches regarding stam karfifois. Now that is the opinion that the Alter Rebbe says we don't paskin like it, but that is what the Rama mentions over there. It's clear from the Rama that stam karfifois is obviously not referring to beis asayim or less, because that is no chiddush. We don't need to know that. He's only talking about more than beis asayim, obviously less than beis asayim. The Bach, right on the Tur on this page, on this Siman, brings the Rosh, that the Rosh was brought in the Tur in Seif Yud, parallel to Seif Yud. The Rosh has a question, because we have a discussion about Zroim Mevatlim, if Zroim are Mevatel the Dira or not Mevatel the Dira. Yeah, there's a question about Zroim when they are Mevatel, if it's Yisrael Miut, there's a whole discussion. We know that Zroim are Mevatel the Hekef. The question is about Rachava, Shaachori, Abatim. The Rosh has is a suffix. Are they Mevatel the Zroim? Is it Mevatel the Hekef and makes it not anymore Mukaf Ladira, or it's not Mevatel? That's what in Shinun-Ches the Rosh has a suffix. The Bach has a question. He says, why does the Rosh Bechal have a suffix? Over here, it's clear that Rachava is like a karfif. And סימן Shinun-Tes, what the Tur writes, it's pretty clear that the Rachava is like a karfif. If it's not Mukaf Ladira, you're not allowed to carry. If it's Mukaf Ladira, you are allowed to carry. So why is there a suffix about Zroim when it comes to Rachava? So he says that he explains that when it's talking about, when do we compare Rachava to karfif? Only regarding the din of hukaf, when it's not hukaf ladira. When it's not hukaf ladira, we say a karfif, it's not a rechava, that's not hukaf ladira, becomes the same category as a karfif. But if it is hukaf ladira, then what's the category of the rechava? Does it remain like a karfif which got surrounded by a wall and now it's a surrounded karfif, or it falls completely off the category of a karfif? It's no longer a karfif. It's a new category, and that category is maybe Zroim and not Mevatel the Dira. Why? Because it is more of a Diras Adam than a Stama Karfif. You understand? We're following the logic that Karfifos are usually used for storage. You don't go into it on a regular basis. So if you have a Karfif which is usually used for storage and it's not used for housing, so if you want to compare the Rachava, Shaachori, Abatim to a regular Karfif, that applies only when it's not hukaf adira. When it is hukaf adira, we don't have to compare it, and it's Zroim will not be mevatel. The svara that Zroim should not be mevatel the dire by a rechava which is mukaf ladira, because a rechava Shaachori Abatim has much more use as a dire than stam a karfif, which is used for storing wood. So, by the way, there's another important difference which Beis Yosef points out in Shinun-Ches. And it's also in Shulchan Aruch that a rechava which is wider, which is exactly beis asayim, is not considered like a karfif. That the Beis Yosef mentioned in Shinun-Ches, the Taz points it out in Shinun-Tes, that there is no, it's not. So there's not a difference between a rechava and a karfif. A rechava that was hukaf l'dira, and a karfif, or bichal rechava, and a karfif was exactly beis asayim. So because it's not clear what the category of a rechava is, a rechava which is hukaf ladira is a rechava really a karfif and therefore zroim are mevatel, or maybe a rechava is not really a karfif and they only tack onto it the din of karfif when it's more than beis asayim, it's like hukaf ladira. And therefore the Rosh had a suffix whether you are mevatel, whether zroim could be mevatel the dire or not. Just point out, the Alter Rebbe, when he discusses Zroim, the dinim of Zroim, which are mevatel the dire in Shinun-Ches, the Alter Rebbe does not mention any difference between Rechava and Karfif. The Chal doesn't mention the word of Rechava over there. The Alter Rebbe puts Rechava in the general category as a Karfif. We're going to get to it soon. There's a Pri Megadim on the Taz in Shinun-Tes. Now you look you look in your book, the Taz, there isn't a Taz on Shinun Tes, but the last Taz of Shinun Ches belongs on Shinun Tes, used to be printed as part of Shinun Tes, so the Mishpat of the Pri Megadim on this Taz is on Shinun Tes, and he points out that this really belongs to Shinun Tes. So the Pri Megadim is in Shinun Tes, and it's referring to a Taz which is in Shinun Ches. The end of printed at the last Taz, the second half of the last Taz in the Shinun Ches. So Pri Megadim sees that there's some sort of confusion, so he wants to give you a general overview of Karfaf and Rechava, which is interesting why he decided to do it at the end of the Siman, not in the beginning of the Siman, but here he brings it out. He says you should know that in these Siman you're going to get a bunch of different concepts. You have a Karmelis, you have a Karfif, you have a Chotzer, and you have a Rechava. Those are 4 concepts you're going to come across in this discussion. He says, what's a Karmelis? So you have a concept of a Karmelis Deiraisa, which is a Bika, empty area outside the city which is planted. You have, which is not Mokim Hiluch L'Rabim, that's a Karmelis from the Torah. Then you have a Derabanan Karmelis, which is a Karfif Yosem Beis Asayim Shaloi Hukaf L'Dira, that Mideiraisa it's a Rishosayachim, Miderabanan it's a Karmelis, right? That's the Karmelis category. Then in Karfif itself, you have different categories of Karfifos. You have the Karfif Yesem Beis Asayim Shel Hukaf L'Dira, which is a Karmelis. You have a Karfif Yesem Beis Asayim that was Mukaf L'Dira. You have a Karfif that's Beis Asayim. You have a Karfif that's less than Beis Asayim. Each one is a different, some of them have different dinim. Some of them you could carry inside, you can't carry to and from. Some of them you could carry to and from the house. Each one is a different category. Some of them for the Hukaf L'Dira, not Hukaf L'Dira. But you should understand there's a Karmelis, there's a Karfif. They're not all one big thing. And Rechava, he says, Rechava, just understand the concept. Rechava is the empty area behind the house, which is usually not used. In those days, it seems like the Chotzer was what's used mainly, which was in front of the house. And the Rechava was not so commonly used. It was used for planting or whatever it was. So Rechava She'achorei Batim was its own category. And the Chotzer. So he says, so what's the difference between Rechava She'achorei Batim and a Karfif? And Bechlal, why should there be a difference between the Rechava, She'achorei Batim, and the Karfif? And he says that Beis Yosef in Shinun Ches points out to you that you have a Rechava which is exactly Beis Asayim and was not Mukaf L'Dira. You are allowed to carry from it to the house and from the house to it. So there's much from the Beis Yosef, it's exactly Beis Asayim. And it's not like a regular Karfif. So why is there a difference in Rechava and a Karfif? So he explains, a Rechava B'chorei Batim is in the city. A Karfif is outside the city. And therefore, simply, there's a difference between them. So why were they machmir in Rechava She'achorei Batim that it should be like a Karfif? L'chayra, if you just said now that Karfif is something which is outside the city, has its own category, why is Rechava She'achorei Batim we are machmir? He is referring to, he says that Rechava She'achorei Batim of such a big size, usually the use you're going to use for it is not going to be the standard use, it's going to be a Karfif use. The fact that you have this big massive area behind your house, probably you're going to use it for the same purpose that you use a Karfif outside the city. So therefore, even though it's not really a Karfif, we attach the din of Karfif to it, and that's why in this, so it's not really a Karfif, but we made it into a Karfif when it's within, if it's bigger than Beis Asayim and it's not surrounded, then we attach to it all the dinim of a Karfif. It's not really a Karfif. That's what it seems like from the Pri Megadim. So if so, when it comes to Zroim, if they're Mevatel or not, he says, that's why there's a suffix. Bechotzer in front of the house in Rechava, which is a Achorei Batim, being that they are not really Karfif, but if they're big enough, we make them similar to a Karfif. That's why there's a doubt whether becomes a suffix, whether the Zrayim are Mevatel L'Dira or Zrayim not Mevatel L'Dira. And if it's a suffix, even though it's a Derabanan, here we should be machmer. Now, the only thing is, that being that ultimately it is a suffix Derabanan, if you have another suffix, he says you have an additional suffix to be able to carry or whatever. You have a guy doing it, shvus to shvus, then we are matir. So that is how they look. And now the Alter Rebbe, like I told you, he avoids most of this problem. because the Alter Rebbe does not differentiate between a karfif outside the city, karfif inside the city. Right, and I think I explained also that the difference, if you look at it, is how to define a karfif, how to understand Rashi. That everybody, most people that look at Rashi, look at it and say that when Rashi says mechutz la'ir, he's determining a condition for a karfif, rather than describing a situation, and therefore it's not enough that you have an area which is used for storage of trees. If it also has to have the condition of mechutz la'ir, which means a faraway place. The karfif, to be able to be Yosem Beis Hasayim, to be able to be considered Oisr Shusayach Shalhukaf Ladira, it has to be outside the city, it has to be far away, which you can understand the logic behind it. Someplace which is close to you, if it's mukaf, automatically you're going to use it for something, you're going to walk around over there, you're going to do something with it. But if it's outside the city, it's not common that you're going to go there. So that's why karfif outside the city is different than karfif inside the city. So that's the condition of it, and that's why the Pri Megadim has to go into a whole discussion. Why is a Rexava Shaachori Abatim? Since it's inside the city, we have to twist it and get into a whole suffix. Not mevatel, is it a karfif? Is it not a karfif? Get into a whole headache on this matter. It seems like from the Alter Rebbe, it's not like that. The Alter Rebbe actually adds, if you look in the beginning of Shinun-Ches, Alter Rebbe adds Rexava Shaachori Abatim into the list of karfif of Kol Shalhukaf Ladira, as opposed to the Shulchan Aruch and the Tur, which don't mention the Rexava Shaachori Abatim in the beginning of Shinun-Ches. The Alter Rebbe does, because the Alter Rebbe looks like what matters is the size and the use. So if you have say the size and the hekef, and if it's mukaf. So if you have the right size, we don't care where location it is. And if it's mukaf, it's mukaf. If it's not mukaf, it's not mukaf. And we don't care where the location is. All the karfifos have the same category. The Rexava is in the list of karfifos, and that's it. And every karfif inside the city. So we solved the problem of understanding the difference between the Rexava and karfif on a simple level. We'll still have a problem because there is a difference between the Rexava and the karfif. Right? And the Alter Rebbe understands that the people who, that's what the Alter Rebbe understands, the Machmirim and סימן Shinun-Ches in the Mechaber, the ones that are Machmir regarding karfif inside the city, that it's the same. That's the Alter Rebbe understands that the karfif is a karfif regardless of where it is. Also, it makes no real difference what was the intention of the person. The person has in mind, because the logic of inside outside the city is if it's inside the city, it's in your mind that you're going to access it on Shabbos. If it's outside the city, it's not in you don't think about it that you're going to go to it during Shabbos or use it, and therefore it's not l'dira sadam. The Rebbe doesn't mention this condition of das adam. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe, when he discusses why in Shinun-Ches, in Sif Yud, when he says that we don't have any difference between Achorei Abatim, that all karfifos, we don't hold like the day that's Mekel, that all karfifos are Hukaf Ladira, and we don't hold like the day that karfifos are outside the city, inside the city are always considered Mukaf Ladira, because they're Machmir. He brings a raya from Rexava. Why? Because we see a Rexava is considered a karfif, so therefore it's a raya, it's a raya that the Rexava is also, Rexava is obviously, Shaachori Abatim is obviously inside the city, because the houses are not outside the city, and it's still considered a karfif. Therefore, it's a raya that karfifos are considered even when they are inside the city. Now, based on that, it's also understood why Zraim are mevatel the dire even inside the city. Whether it's a Rexava or a Chotzer, it seems like from the Alter Rebbe that the Zraim are mevatel in every single scenario, regardless of what it is, because the Alter Rebbe does not differentiate inside outside the city, does not differentiate about das adam, so the Zraim would be mevatel, doesn't have the suffix of the Rosh when it comes to a Rexava. And that's why the Alter Rebbe mentions Rexava in the beginning of Shinun-Ches, discusses all the dinim of a karfif with Rexava included in it, discusses the din of Zraim and doesn't differentiate between them because it's also included in the same rechava. Anything which is loy hukaf ladire is in the same category as that. What's the definition of a hukaf ladire? We saw in the beginning of Shinun-Ches, loy hukaf ladiras adam leknisa v'yitzia tamid, for standard usage on a regular basis. And the rechava she'achori abatim is not the additional example in Shinun-Ches, but the first example that the Alter Rebbe brings in Shinun-Ches is rechava she'achori abatim. As opposed to, and then afterwards he brings all the other ones. If you look in the, I don't know the Alter Rebbe in front of me, but it says over there, I think the lashon of the Alter Rebbe is, the first one is rechava she'achori abatim. Kol hekef mechizah shel hukaf v'dei asad mekinsa v'tzia tamid kegoin, for example, rechava she'achori abatim. And then vakarfef, which is a hekef gadol. So that's the first, right away, the first example of what's going to be for all the discussions afterwards. It's all included in the same one. And really, you can't carry from them or to them. But still, now we have a problem. You're going to put the rechava she'achori abatim together with all the other ones, and that if it's rechava, which is now in regarding to karfif, we know that if it's beis asayim, if it's more than beis asayim, the rechava and the karfif is the same. If it's exactly beis asayim by a karfif in Shinun-Ches, we say you're not allowed to carry to it or from it. And in Shinun-Tes, Alter Rebbe does bring that you are allowed to carry from it and to it when it is exactly beis asayim. So now when you look in the beginning of Shin-Nun-Tes, and you see what the lashon Alter Rebbe over there, and Alter Rebbe adds over there when he explains why if it has no base, if it has more than beis asayim, it's like a karfif. Avalim ein lo beis asayim, but elo beis asayim. But if it only has beis asayim exactly, and obviously if it has less than that, ein lo din karfif. It doesn't have the category of a karfif, and therefore mutar lataltal miteichel lebayis and bayis miteichel, allowed to carry from each for each stone. The fisha eino reshus mechulekes min habayis. Alter Rebbe explains why. This is what he adds on. It's not become a separate. It's not a separate entity from the house. Kigon k'mei karfif. A karfif, even if it's behind the house, even if it's next to the house, we consider it a separate entity. A rechava really is not a separate entity. It's not really a separate entity from the house. A rechava is not a separate entity from the house. So if it's beis asayim or less, it's not really considered a karfif. That means that when it comes to a karfif, to make it a karfif, which even beis asayim and not be able to carry to and from it, it has to have an additional, so to speak, definition that it is separate, a reshus mechulekes from the house, a reshus mechulekes from the bayis. And it's not part of the area which you use for dira. And that you see it here in Shinun-Tes, in the beginning of Shinun-Tes. It's not that's a beis asayim. It's not considered a reshus mechulekes. The same thing you have in Sif Daled and Shinun-Ches also. That when he explains the karfif, he says reshus bifnei atzmei mechulekes ma'bayis shu mokim dira mamash. The house is a mokim dira mamash, and the karfif is reshus mechulekes. But by a rechava, if it's beis asayim or less than beis asayim, it doesn't fall into the category of reshus b'fnei atzma chulekes ma'dira, and therefore you're allowed to carry to and from the house. And why is it so that it's a separate, that's a different category, that by a rechava it's different than the other one? If you look in Shinun-Tes, you always know when you look at the footnotes, the Mekayres, if it's a different font, that's what was originally in the first print of the Alter Rebbe, which is usually from the Alter Rebbe, from the Maril. So there the Alter Rebbe just writes, Ritva b'S Yosef Magen Avram. And what is it? If you look in which Ritva is talking about, the Ritva is mentioned in the B'S Yosef and Shinun-Ches. Over there, the Ritva discusses about the rechava she'achori abatim. The Ritva says that each person makes for himself a rechava behind his house, which right now is still not closed, but its only use is for the people to go from the havoi legavoy yavidan lebroi lo yavidan. That's the rechava which is made for the people to use in the back and not for anything else. And then if you are makif it, then it's hukaf l'dira. If it's not makif, if you don't make it, it's not considered mukaf l'dira. But even before it's hukaf l'dira, if it's before it's hukaf, after it's hukaf l'dira, it's for sure not a problem. Before it's hukaf l'dira, a rachava really by definition wouldn't have been a full-fledged karfif because of if you have the size, so the size makes it a karfif. If it's beis asayim, it doesn't go anymore into the size because the karfif, the din of karfif is yosin and beis asayim. Beis asayim is where we're machmer on it. But when it comes to the rachava shacher abatim, we say beis asayim is really a continuation of the house. Yosin and beis asayim already falls to the category of karfif. Beis asayim exactly doesn't fall to the category of karfif, and it's not considered a rishus bifnei atzmai. So if it's more than beis asayim, it has the din of a karfif. If it's beis asayim or less, it never made it into the category of a karfif. Not that it's a karfif and we change its status, and that's why we have a question, yeah mevatel, not mevatel. It is a karfif which it never made it into the category of a karfif. So here, this is where the Alter Rebbe says, and here in this case of a rechava, is when we do rely on the shitta of stam, rechava is considered mukaf l'dira, but when is it? When the taka has a hekef. We see a hekef around the karfif, and we say, around the rechava, and we say, rechava, shachory abatim, plus a hekef probably was mukaf l'dira. Over here he does rely on stam, but in a karfif, in a regular karfif, we don't rely on this svare that stam karfifos are hukaf l'dira. And also if it's more than beis asayim, we also don't rely on this svare that if it's more than beis asayim, a stam karfif is hukaf l'dira. And why is that? The marker that the Alter Rebbe is, which tells you Beis Yosef and Ritva. It does not go based on the Ramah. So the svara over here is also based on how the Ritva understands that stam karfifos. Stam karfifos of beis asayim or less, not a stam karfif which is more than that. Now, so if the rechava is more than beis asayim, we said before that if it has the same din as a karfif, over there we can't rely on it. If it's more than a beis asayim, it's no longer in the category of a rechava. We already explained. Based on Alter Rebbe, based on Bechal, the svara is that you look at the size. Once it's more than beis asayim, it automatically made it into the category of a karfif. It made it into the category of a karfif. We no longer could say that klal, that stam karfifo is hukaf l'dira. Right, that is regarding this topic. Now, being that we're discussing the whole idea of Zraim, I want to go into one more nekuda, which is in same Siman Ches, and if you Zayin, I did discuss it in short in the previous year. I want to go into it now because there's another point I wanted to discuss over here. In Siman Ches, if you Zayin, the Alter Rebbe over there discusses about a karfif which is mukaf l'dira, and it's more than beis asayim, that if the majority of it was planted with Zraim, the Zraim are mevatlim the dira, and why? Because ain't derech l'der b'Zraim, you don't live in a cornfield, and therefore the miut is batal to the roif. Nizra rubai, the miut becomes batal to the roif, and you're not allowed to carry anywhere. But if nizra miutoi, if only you have a very big karfif, much more than beis asayim, and nizra miutoi, only a small part of it became nizra, and then the nizra part is exactly beis asayim, then the Alter Rebbe says you're allowed to carry in the whole karfif, including in the area of the zroim. Why? Because the base in which are nizra are exactly beisim. They're not yoser mibeisa, and so therefore mibeisa. Therefore they're not yoser beis asayim. And therefore you're allowed to carry in the whole area. Now the rest of it doesn't become batal to it. Why? Because this is the miut. The beis asayim that's planted is the miut of the whole karfif. So to say that the rest of it becomes batal to it and all becomes asur, you can't say. To say that makes everything else asur, also not, because that's exactly beis asayim. and it doesn't join it to make it more than Beis Hasayim to make it puzzle. But you're not allowed to carry from the karfif to the house. Even though within the karfif we say you're allowed to carry, from the karfif to the house you're not allowed to carry. Why? Because nifras b'miloi l'mokim to a place which is asur. In the Beis Hasayim, that area is essentially becomes asur to the house. It means the Beis Hasayim is here, and you have the house. Because it's Beis Hasayim of Zorua, if it would be just this Beis Hasayim Zorua, it would make it asur from there to carry to the house, because Beis Hasayim is Zorua. Now, the area which is the majority of the karfif, which is part of B'miloi, there's no mechitza between that and the Beis Hasayim. Therefore, this area, which is a karfif, which is not Zorua, becomes part of B'miloi to the area of Beis Hasayim, which is asur to the house, and therefore you're not allowed to carry from the empty area into the house, and not from the house to this empty area. And the Alter Rebbe says, yes, there are yesh matirim. There is a shitta which is matir to carry from the area which was not Zorua to the house, and from the house to the area which is not Zorua, even though it's part of B'miloi, and that is the shit of the Taz. Why? Because it's not part of B'miloi to an area which is Asur Mitzad Atzmai. This Beis Hasayim is not a place which has an Isur Mitzad Atzmai, an independent Isur. It's not inherently Asur. The only reason this Beis Hasayim is Asur is because from it to the house. It's not a full Carmelis. A full Carmelis will be Yosef in Beis Hasayim. This Beis Hasayim is only Asur because it's next to the house. And therefore, it cannot, since it's not inherently Asur, it can't make the place to which it's parutz also Asur. So it doesn't make it's take parutz, but it's not parutz l'mokim Asur, inherently Asur. The Alter Rebbe says you have to be machmer like the first svara. The Tzemach Tzedek in the Chidushim on Rabbeinu Yerucham, which I did bring to you, I mentioned in the past, it's in the back of Piskei Dinim. It's in Piskei Dinim in page Shin Samach Aleph, and in your book it's in page 101, 102. And he repeats basically what it says in what's at the bottom of 101. Starts it similar to what it says here in Seif Yud Zayin and Alter Rebbe. Over there, and then he says that in the top of page 102 that if the Nizra area is the miut, a karfif, and it was mukaf l'dira, then if there's Beis Hasayim exactly, you're allowed to carry in the whole thing. Why? Like we said, because the roiv is not bottled to the miut, and the roiv which is not Zorua is considered a chotzer, and you're allowed to carry from the miut Zorua into the majority which is not Zorua, and from either within that area. But Asur, you cannot carry from the house. You're not allowed to carry from the house to the empty area to the chatzir, and from the chatzir to the house. Why? Because there's no mechitza mafsekas, there's no mechitza separating between them. And that is a day of the Mardochi, and that is the first opinion in the Alter Rebbe. And therefore, and the Tzemach Tzedek over here, he explains it a little bit more, and when he explains the shit of the Mardochi, he already farentfers why it's different than the shit of the Taz. The Lashon is, legabe habayis, relative to the house, hine oise mokem shal nizra, nifras v'miloi l'mokem asur loi. The place which is not nizra is part of miloi to a place which is asur to the house. The oise mokem shal nizra have a asur legabe habayis. That area which is nizra becomes asur relative to the house, and therefore to carry from the house to this area is asur. And he says, yes, the Taz is Mekel. It's a big there's a parenthesis over there in the first column. The Taz is Mekel, but Alter Rebbe is Machmir. And Alter Rebbe says you have to be Machmir. The different Nehemiah, also in your book, it's in this new print, it's L'kutim Siman Zayin, and the old print is page Tesamot Beis. In your book, it's page 132. Over there, he discusses this Seif Yud Zayin. Now, the Lashon Alter Rebbe is Yesh Lahachmir Kesvara Rishayna. Yesh Lahachmir. The first thing that the Nehemiah points out to you is, when the Alter Rebbe says Yesh Lahachmir, it means it's a chiyuv al pidin to be machmer. It's not an option. It's a chiyuv. What's the raya for it? From a kuntrasachran of the Alter Rebbe in סימן Vav, which we learned last year in Koilo. Yeah, the kuntrasachran Reish Vav Sifkot Gimel. Over there, the Alter Rebbe is discussing. The Alter Rebbe says in the pnim of Reish Vav, v'toiv la'chush. The Ramah on the same shitta writes, yesh lahachmer. The Alter Rebbe in Kuntrasachran says, this is all not written in the it's in the Kuntrasachran. The Alter Rebbe in Kuntrasachran says that even though the Ramah says yesh lahachmer, really the Ramah means toiv lahachmer, and not that yesh lahachmer, which makes it chiyuv bedavar. So based on that, there's Nehemiah points out to you, says if it says yesh lahachmer over here, obviously it means it's a chiyuv. So the question is, whenever it says yesh lahachmer, it becomes a chiyuv. You see it across in a lot of other places. And the only question is, I don't know, Yerei Shemayim Yachmer La'atzmoi doesn't say Toiv, doesn't say he should be Machmer. He's Yachmer, he has to be Machmer. It's also the Chayra Chiyuv and Yerei Shemayim. If you think Yerei Shemayim, you have to be Machmer. Yes, so the different Nehemiah points out over here, he says that it's, the fact that Alter Rebbe writes Yesh L'Hachmer, it's pretty clear that Alter Rebbe holds there's a Chiyuv Medina. That it's a mandatory Chiyuv to be Machmer like the Shitta of the Mordechai, and not like the Taz, that you're not allowed to carry from, if a karfa which is much more than Beis Hasayim, and it was Hukaf Ladira, and Nizra Miutay, but the Miut is exactly Beis Hasayim, you're not allowed to carry from the Chatz area, from the empty area, into the house, or back from the house into that area, according to the Taz. So he tells you, if you look in the footnote over there in Sif Yud Zayin, and that's footnote Kuf Lamed Hey in the Shulchan Aruch, that he references one of the Ma'anim Mekayim, says Ramah and סימן Tov Gimel. What's in Tov Gimel? Over there, before we get to what the kasha is, over there the Mechaber says somebody who was Shabbos in the Bika. Bika is a big empty area, it's planted outside the city, and he has 2,000 amas, that's all he has, right? But it's not surrounded. So there's no tchum. The tchum is from where you stand, 2,000 amas. Middle of Shabbos, Goyim came and closed off the whole bikah. So now it's a Carmelis, which was just closed off by Goyim, and became Ukaf. And over there, it says that you could walk only 2,000 amas, even though the bikah is much bigger than 2,000 amas. So the now that there's a hekef, you should be able to walk all the way to the edge of the hekef, maybe even 2,000 amas past that. No, you can only walk 2,000 amas from where you're standing, in every direction, even though the gate is bigger than it. Why? Because it's Tchum Shabbos. And regarding carrying tiltul, the first Alter Rebbe brings the shit of the Ri and Taisvis, that you could only carry Daled amas. Even though you could walk 2,000 amas, you can only carry Daled amas in every direction. And that is how the Ramah paskins. Why? Because it's nifratz, the area that you're allowed to carry to is nifratz, the area you're not allowed to carry to. You have a bikah which is 4,000 amas. You could, even though you could technically you would be able to carry 2,000 amas, but those 2,000 amas are part of the miloi to the area past it, which is also for you to carry. So you're not allowed to carry more than Daled amas. You can't carry the whole 2,000 amas. That's the shit of the Ramah. And then the Alter Rebbe brings the shit of the Taz over there. The Taz is Mekel, and says you could carry the whole 2,000 amas. Why? Because the Taz holds that you can't compare it to Nifrat Samakim Asur. Because over here, the area where it says the Taz holds, it's not Nifrat. Why? Because there's no Isur to actually carry in that area. If the Mechitza would have been done before Shabbos, you'd be able to carry in the whole thing. The Mechitza was done after Shabbos, so you can't carry in the whole thing. So there's no inherent Isur to carry past the 2,000 amas. So it's Nifrat b'milui, not mitzad Isur tiltul, but mitzad Isur tchumen. Therefore, it's Nifrat b'milui, but not enough to make it a Makam Asur loy that you should not be, that it should be considered as if you're not allowed to carry in the whole area. And the Taz and the Alter Rebbe paskins like the Taz, not like the Ramah over here. The Alter Rebbe is Mekel. For the Taz, it makes sense. The Taz is mekel in Shinun Ches. They says that the category of nifratz only applies when it's nifratz to a place which is inherently usher. And over here also he says nifratz is only to a place which is inherently usher. Questions on the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe tells you in Shinun Ches, sends you to Tav Gimel, obviously to the Ramah and Tav Gimel, which is Machmir, but the Alter Rebbe himself is mekel. So the Nechemia says, Akasha, how could you have, in one place the Alter Rebbe is Machmir, and in one place, in Shinun Ches, the Alter Rebbe goes against the Taz and says, Nifratz b'milui does work. It is nifratz b'milui, and therefore you're not allowed to carry. And in Tav Gimel, the Alter Rebbe passing like a Taz, and nifratz b'milui is not really nifratz b'milui, and you are allowed to carry the whole 2,000 amas. So the Divin Nechemia over there brings two answers. I'll just give you the first short one. The next one goes into discussion of Chas Yom Tov. I don't want to get into it. So the first one is that Divin Nechemia says we have to differentiate between the different nifratzes, right? So until now we had one differentiation. The Taz has one differentiation. Is it asur because of itself, or is it asur because of something else? If it's asur because of something else, it's not considered nifratz. If it's asur because of itself, it is considered nifratz. But if you look at the Lashon Alter Rebbe, when he understands it, it comes into, there's another category in nifratz. Yeah? In the case of the Tchum and Tav Gimel, there is absolutely no Isser to be metaltal in that area. Even though the Isser is only to the person, there is no Isser to the person, there is no Isser to be metaltal over there. The Isser is for the person to get there. That means the person just can't walk past it. So if he can't walk past it, he obviously can't carry past it. But if he would be able to walk past it, he would be able to carry past it. So there is no Isser Tiltul at all over here. So what is it nifratz? It's an area which you're allowed to walk to. Nifratz is a place you're not allowed to walk to. It's not about carrying. So this is not about carrying. So over there, the Alter Rebbe is mekel. But over here, there is an Isser in Tiltul itself. Yes, it's not an inherent Isser, but it's an Isser because of the house that's next to it. You're not allowed to carry from the house to there because it's Beis Osayim. But there is a Isser Tiltul involved. So if it's Nifratz b'milui to a place which has a Isser Tiltul, it's considered Asur. So that's the first reason that the different Nechemia is. Just to understand it different, to explain it. If it's Nifratz b'milui to a place which has an inherent Isser to be metaltal because of itself, it's a karmas rishus harabim, so everybody holds that it's Asur. Nifratz b'milui. If it has a Isser to be metaltal, which is caused by something else, but still has an Isser to be metaltal, like this Beis Osayim, which is Nifratz b'milui to the Chotzer, and the only reason you're not allowed to carry the Beis Osayim is because if it will be next to the house, it would because it's connected to the house, therefore it's also to carry from the house to a Beis Osayim which is planted. So according to the Alter Rebbe, that is considered nifratz, the way the Nechemia understands, that is considered nifratz b'milui, to a place where there is a Isser Tiltul. According to the Taz, it's not considered a problem. Why? Because Taz looks at it is the place considered Asur? Over here, the place is not Asur. It's only Asur because of a side reason. Now, Alter Rebbe says we don't look whether the place is Asur because of itself or a side reason. We look, is there Isser Tiltul or is there no Isser Tiltul? When it comes to Tchumim, the Alter Rebbe goes the other way. He says there is no Isser Tiltul over here. The only Isser there is over here is the Isser of walking. Because there's only Isser of walking, not an Isser of Tiltul. Therefore, we don't consider it Nifratz b'milui. You could be mekel in Divrei Seifrim, and you could rely on that shitta. The second reason that the different Nechemia brings, another reason and with that I'm going to conclude. In the din of Tchumim, Rashi over there is clearly mekel. So when the Alter Rebbe is mekel, he's relying on Rashi, not chaylik on anybody. And therefore, over there is mekel. Over here, when the Rashi doesn't discuss anything of this question, Tosfos is machmir, and therefore to be mekel against Tosfos, the Alter Rebbe was not ready to do that for his machmir like the Taz. And that's, in short, the beginning of the Divrei Nechemia. And Divrei Nechemia goes into and there's another 3 paragraphs. The Divrei Nechemia brings a raya why maybe you should be mekel, and then explains why 2 svaris why, and it compares it to Hilchos Yom Tov. It brings 2 svaris why you should not be mekel. I don't want to get into it now, but definitely enjoyable if you want to get to it. With this, we will finish. Mitzvah Hashem, there will be a share this afternoon at 5 o'clock on the beginning of Even HaEzer Siman Beis.